Hey everybody, welcome. This is my co-host for the day, Brian.
Yes, I'll do my best. I mean, Sarita's tough shoes, right? Like to fit into. So I'll do my best here.
Well, where are you guys all joining us from? You know, I always start with that question because I always get excited to see all the places. Oh, two all-stars. Heather must be here. Heather, I miss you, girl. I hardly got any time with you last year. Richie Laser, just such a great supporter every week. So awesome to meet you
I
in person.
saw I saw Richie. I saw
Yep.
Richie when I was walking around a couple times.
Richie made it a point to come and meet me face to face because he's been on every single one of these. It was great.
It's awesome.
Hi, Mark. Hey, everybody. Well, listen, we're going to get started because you guys are here on time. And as you know, my name's Vija Williams. And what maybe you don't know, I think most of you know, I've got a co-host today named Brian Gubernick. Do you guys all know Brian? Who here knows Brian? Get in chat and let us know if you know Brian.
If you don't know me, still say you do, so I don't have a complex the rest of the day. You know.
No, I think it's fun when we give him complexes. So we are here. Sarita Dua and I usually are here every Wednesday live at noon Pacific time, 3 Eastern. And today she is just getting off a plane. So I said, Brian, why don't we go through our takeaways from BuiltHOW? Now, if you did not go to our conference, BuiltHOW, last week in Phoenix, Arizona, that is okay. It is okay. You're going to get a ton out of this because really what this is, I think, is a litmus test and kind of having your finger on the pulse of where the market is, where the world is, where culture is, right? Where personal development is. I think that it was one of those conferences. We had about 2,500 people. It was packed solid. And we had, real estate people and non-real estate people there. So I think the takeaways are going to be just as tangible and relevant, whether you were there or not there. If you were there, and you are in chat, we would love your takeaways too, and we'll read them. We really would. So let us know as we're talking if things are coming up for you. If there's things that we're not saying that you're like, you got to say this. This is a massive takeaway. Let us know. And Brian's all prepared. I'm gonna pepper in, but he's the main voice today on this. I think he's got a lot of great insight. We kind of decided, I think, Brian, I think we decided we're going to kind of do 3 buckets of takeaway. So the first is going to be kind of agent productivity, sort of from the real estate standpoint. How can you better your business, better your team? What takeaways did we get from that? There might be some economic stuff in there as well. The second one would be sort of leadership, business growth, right? Just running a business, running, in leadership, leading people. And then the third was that the wonderful components we had on personal development and personal growth. So kind of 3 buckets that we're going to tackle. Is that fair, Brian? Does that sound good?
No, I think that sounds fantastic. I even liked how you set it up that Brian's going to be the main speaker today. That was very,
It was
very
good.
smart there,
You
Via.
notice that?
Yes, I love how you do that. I do think in addition to those 3 buckets, you'll find we'll keep coming back to this built for this theme, right? For those that were at BuiltHOW, for those that were not, the theme was very much built for this. We are built for whatever's in front of us. And I want to keep coming back to that, Via, because you played a very hands-on role. I played a very hands-on role on the content and the subjects that we wanted to make sure we covered over those few days. And we always came back to, does this panel, does this topic, does this presenter, what they share, is it leaning into this built for this theme?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure we're tying back to that too. Like, how is this nugget that we share, or this, maybe someone in the chat shares, how does that come back to being prepared for whatever's in front of us?
Well, I love that, Brian, 100%. And the reason I love it is again, whether you were there or not, that should be our mindset right now. Hey, man, we were built for this. Bring it on, right? And that's really what we're trying to convey, because you can't control what's happening in an economy and in a world and in a market. You just can't control it, right? You can decide if you're going to be successful And it's just a matter of what it looks like and how you're going to be successful, not if you're going to be successful in any given market, right? And so built for this should be our sentiment anyway, whether we were there or not. Brian, could you do me a favor? And I know probably, 99% of everybody here knows about you, but before we launch into kind of that agent productivity bucket, could you just kind of tell everybody briefly who you are so that they have some context for who they're hearing from?
Sure. I've been at it a little while, right, Via? So I've been in real estate since
Join the club.
2005 and selling since 2007. So I'm in my 16th year of being a licensed realtor. I have held an awful lot of seats within the industry, starting as solo agent, building teams, building brokerages, getting into title and mortgage and all these things. And today I spend 90% of my time in the chief real estate officer role over at Place alongside you, Via. And then I spend that remaining 10% between running a large mastermind group that meets every quarter called Metrics, and spending some time writing and recording different content. I broadcast every day on No Days Off on the podcast. And so bottom line, I'm a realtor. I've just, held a variety of different positions, but I always come back to that. When I attend something like BuiltHOW, and while you and I were presenting, we were also sitting in the audience. I mean, I am there with my notepad just as much as anybody else. I'm always looking at it from the real estate sales agent perspective, because I still see myself as one. But in addition to that, I think I probably talk to more real estate agents and real estate teams across the nation than most anybody, given the nature of my role today. And so what I share today, I just want everyone to know I'm coming from the perspective of, alongside you in the trenches, here's the things that I took note of that I need to coach and train and, frankly, implement in my own business.
Yeah. I would just loosely call it productivity, all things, real estate, right? Let me start with this, since we talked about a theme. Now I'm throwing you. We did not script this. By the way, everybody, we did not script this. So this is just us talking right now, right? Would you say, Brian, there was a prevailing thread across all of them, or no? Any predominant
surprise sentence? You or may not be what you think I could say. I'll tell you, not to go off on a tangent, but there's a phenomenal book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Specific knowledge. You've got to be a master of something. Like the generalist is going to really struggle given the direction of the world today. Now, why do I share that? When you say, what did you see as a theme, right? Like I might look at it with from a slightly different vantage point, but every single presenter that I was watching Via, I was like, wow, he's a master of that subject. Wow, she's really dialed into that subject. Like we had subject matter experts, but they'd all monetized that expertise. They had specific knowledge. And so when I hear different individuals that appeared on panels, when I hear Peter Liu talk about how he's approaching his business, when I heard, Kimberly Meserve talk about building events, when I mean, fill in the blank. I mean, there's so many of them. Like
the new construction panel. I'm thinking of the new construction guys, super niched, super specific, masters of their craft.
How about like Robbie T talking about lead conversion, like specific scripts and how to, like, to me, I saw a lot of specific knowledge. I saw a lot of expertise, and I share that coming right out the gate because I do really believe that as realtors, we have a tendency to kind of become generalists, right? Like we dabble in lots of different areas. And one of my biggest takeaways was, what am I mastering? What have I kind of carved out as my niche or my area of focus? Even something like expireds, like I become the expired person, or I become the open house or the community specialist. That niche, I think, is really going to be required to thrive and be built for this. moving forward. That was a theme I caught. Again, I don't know if that was one you had even in your mind, but I just was like, man, everyone's got their stuff. Like they're nailing it in their specific niche.
I think that's a great answer. No, I didn't. I don't think I walked into that question with any preconceived notion. Like, I think that's really super smart. Let's get into tactical, actionable takeaways. What did you hear that did hit your list?
One of the very first things that I made note of, and it's going to sound weird because I was facilitating the conversation alongside Ben with our buddy from Goldman Sachs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when I say facilitating, I was just looking for ways I could jump into the conversation so I didn't look super awkward on stage.
Perfect.
Because Ben's going to drive that conversation. And I'll tell you, as I was listening to him, and I love the economic conversation, right? Like, and there were a lot of takeaways as to where Goldman is projecting the world to go. But I'll tell you, like, my first big takeaway, I literally made note from stage, like on my notepad. People may see me writing things down. I literally wrote down, I need to do a better job teaching investment and how to become a landlord to my prospective sellers. In other words, I asked Michael, I don't know if you remember, I said to him towards the end of the conversation, I said, hey, Michael, make believe that, your family's now grown and you've outgrown your home. And I'm coming in as a listing agent to talk to you about selling your home. What do you need to hear from me? What would you want your agent to tell you about selling or about the economy or about the housing market that would prompt you to take action, or at least give you comfort in taking action? And his answer, the very first thing he said was, well, I would need you to talk to me about what it would look like for me to hold the home, because I've got such a low mortgage rate, and buy without selling the one I'm in, go buy a new home, but hold the one I'm presently in. And like, it was a light bulb moment for me, because I was like, we need to be teaching prospective clients that they don't need to sell their home to buy their next one. They need to better understand what holding a home looks like and how that's an investment opportunity given the 2.9% interest rate they have.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we should be showing up armed with rent projections, so we could back into the math around what holding the rental would look like. Sorry, a little long-winded, but when we were going through that economic conversation, I'm like, wow, I've been so focused on, is now the time to sell? Is now not the time to sell? And you know what? That shouldn't be the driver of the conversation. It should be, what if I want to hold this property? Talk to me about that math.
Brian, I love that answer. And here's where my head went with that, because it almost like threads everything together. Because if you look at not just BuiltHOW, but what we're trying to teach our agents, it's investment for themselves, because you always want to lead yourself first before you lead others. So it's investments, it's wealth building, it's real estate, it's all the things. And to me, what your answer is describing is that we are a full stack real estate consultant and advisor to our clients. We are not just a one transaction agent, right? But I tell this story. A lot of you guys have heard me share it when I speak about it's Ben's doctor story. I won't share the whole story now, but I'll tell you what I will do. I'll do a mini little
Ben, your husband?
No, Ben Kinney.
Okay.
Ben Kinney, one of the top 3 stories in real estate about who we should be as agents. I'll record a BuiltHOW, a little mini podcast episode on that story. The bottom line is we can do that with a couple different questions, Brian. We can walk into any consult and we can say, do you own any other real estate? That's a really good question to write down. Do you own any other real estate, Brian? Because what that does is it immediately makes our brain and their brain think of us as thinking about the whole portfolio. Because to your point, maybe they should sell their $2 million house. That may not make sense as a rental, but maybe they could sell another. And maybe that, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but we can ask that question. And then we can also ask, what their exit strategy is in their investment portfolio. Are they in a cash flow mode? Some people don't want cash flow, but some people don't want taxable income right now. They really don't need it. They don't want that much of it. Some people, like me, I don't care about my net worth. All I want is income, is cash flow, right? So asking some questions and learning to ask the right questions, to walk into those conversations. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love it.
I really liked it. And on that note, another thing I wrote down from that Goldman conversation, and it was really short and sweet. We all need to speak more intelligently around the housing market and specifically around the economy. Like, we got to stop making excuses around it, myself included, right? Like, I need to be more active, and I am fairly active, but I could be even better around understanding the economy, interest rates, how it's impacting the housing market. Like, the truth of the matter is, and this was, again, another takeaway for me, and I saw this throughout a number of panels. There was a theme, another theme. What was going through my mind. When we go see our attorney via, like, I don't need to know all the intricacies of the law. I just want to be led towards the right solution or the right path. When I go see a doctor, which hopefully is not all that often, but I don't need to know medicine. I just want to feel led. Like, I want to be led. And I really think that the agents that do it best are giving so much, like giving confidence to the prospect, and we're leading them. And again, the only way you're going to do that, to bring it back around to this, is we got to be more intelligent around what makes up this market, what drives this market. Like, everybody should be engaged with what Michael Murdoch and Goldman's sharing. We should be nodding our head. We should be leaning in. And sometimes it's the subject that doesn't get a tremendous amount of applause. And it actually is arguably the most important one that we had over those few days,
Whenever I teach agents how to share data, I use two keywords. We are translators and interpreters of data. So to your point, when you go to talk to that attorney or sometimes even that doctor, and they're just spouting off a whole bunch of facts and data, that I don't know how relevant that is to me in my life. Like, what I want to know is what's in it for me. We call that with them, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. How does that affect me, Doc? Like, maybe you could cut out 80% of that and just talk about the 20% that affects me, and we can unpack that together, and we might go into that 80%, right? So I think that as agents, how I'm interpreting what you're saying is learning how to take the knowledge of the market and bring it back down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 State Street and their house and their situation and what it means for them, and what it looks like in their portfolio with their outcome in mind and what they're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah, love it. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, so good. Anything else from an agent standpoint that kind of jumped out at you?
I would say also from the agent standpoint, I heard a lot of, hey, the elephant in the room, in my opinion, and we talked about it the day before, and I heard it come up in different ways throughout the panels. Like, the elephant in the room is like, we could strategize, we could work on skill, we can improve our knowledge, et cetera. But the elephant in the room is like, we're facing a market that's going to require us to work harder. It's just a fact. And nobody likes to talk around that. Like, we're looking for a different solution that isn't adding 2 more hours to our workday, but we're in a certain season. And a lot of what we were building as far as content goes, Via, it was around mindset. And the mindset is, things are going to be harder and you're going to have to step up if you want to just maintain where you're presently at. And you're going to have to really step up if you want to thrive. But we welcome that challenge. And so within the panels, and I've got different panels here, I heard a lot of you got to go do the activities. Like, stop making excuses. You got to do the activities. Like, I go back to the panel around events, and they all laid out a framework for the events. Well, guess what? Events are not going to be successful unless you follow the program, unless you do the activities. Like, we are not in a world where we're order taking anymore. We've got to be order generating, order creating. And so every panel, to me, again, Via, had a theme around, you got to do the work. You got to do the activities. We're not going to trip and fall into these deals like we did in 21 and 22.
I did a panel with Spring Benson, Michael Perna, and Veronica Figueroa. I mean, each of them are at, over 7-8 million GCI, really, really large teams. Every single one of them basically described what you're saying, basically described jumping back in. I'm seeing Heather here, Eric Hatch for sure, right? Joe Herrera, Taylor Prince, right? Jumping back in at a level, this isn't an ego thing. It's not I mean, just whatever it takes, right? Jumping in and doing the work. And that looked different for each of them. For some of them, it was literally sitting in the bullpen, lead generating with their agents. Now, they might have been lead generating for talent, didn't matter. They're still doing their lead gen alongside the agents. Some of them were on the phone making, it didn't matter. They all came in and did the work. And yet I'll talk to teams that are a solo agent and assistant and a buyer's agent, and that agent is insistent that they won't work with that buyer because they don't do that anymore, right? Well, the real leaders and the really big businesses understand they are back in it, Brian. They're like in there, they're working, doing it.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, we actually had a panel on, it was Jake DeRosa, and I'm trying to remember who else was with them, but the theme was, I think Jim Blem, the theme was staying consistent. So it wasn't like what you just said, Vija, you nailed it. You got to get
Bailey
in.
was in that one too.
There you go. And you got to model the behavior, but it's not like you just, what do we call that? Seagull management, when you fly in, and then fly back out. This is a fly in, but stay there and be consistent over time. That was the theme of that panel. I loved it. Everybody on here today and everyone that's going to listen, Vija, I'd like to think we're all playing the long game, right? Like we're not playing for the next year. We're playing for the next decades, right? So
yeah. And here's the thing, guys, like because I said it on stage, so I'll say it here. I interviewed Spring last year. Spring's she's going to double her business almost in a year that everybody is like going down, right? And when things started turning south, when did they start turning south? It was last like July. I think it was like maybe July 22, maybe August.
Yeah, there was a pivot. It was maybe a little later, but regardless, like depending on the market you're in, we started seeing a pivot mid last year. Yeah.
I actually think I started seeing it June, July, maybe it was August, September, but she did what we all knew we should have done back then. Back then, we were all talking about, you guys better recruit, you better cut your expenses 30%, recruit 30% higher. She actually did what everyone talked about doing. By the time January rolled around and I was interviewing people and meeting with people, there was a tough Q1, very tough first quarter for everybody. She was at her record that she had ever done in January, and 80% of her business were new agents that she had started recruiting that August and September. Because that was now at 90, 120 days, or just getting into stride, 80% of her business. And I think she ended the first quarter with like 70% of her first quarter business being new agents.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's so good. And this was not on a panel, but a panelist. I was talking with Nick Waldner, who was on, he was talking around productivity with, actually, Vija, I think you ran that panel.
I did. It was him. It was a great panel. It was, I'll find out who was on there.
It was Waldner, Perna, and Scott, I think. And nice. I was talking with Nick Waldner in the vendor hall. And I remember him mentioning that I'm going to say this the wrong way, but being consistent, like the consistency is what's going to win out. Like he's been in the business for 20 years and it doesn't matter the fluctuations, the ebbs and flows of the market. It was just the consistency of doing it over and over again with a long-term mentality that was going to drive it. And so, just all of it. It was just so powerful, I think, just the consistency.
And you reminded me, that panel I was just describing, it was Spring, Veronica, and Jay White, because you're right, Michael Perna was on that other panel, there you go. That's how my brain is this week after last week. Well, good. Well, anything else on agent productivity that kind of jumps out at you? I think I was just looking up, our next bucket is going to be tactical kind of business and leadership.
No, I think there'll be some overlap, but let's get into the next segment.
Let's do it. So tactical business and leadership, what jumps out at you the most?
Tactical business and leadership. I don't want to necessarily go to the Jesse, Colin, Sarah personal growth side, but naturally there's going to be an overlap. And so when I'm looking at my notes here, when I think about Sarah, right, like the persistence, and more specifically, the vision, right? Like I've got a goal I know where I want to go. I've got a why. Like I'm getting there by any means necessary. I think from a leadership perspective, all of us leading agents, leading teams, leading brokerages, I don't know, not to pick on anybody, but I don't know if we're as clear on our vision or as our objectives as we could or should be. In other words, do you truly have a goal? Does that goal matter? And if the answer is, well, maybe not, okay, well, then my guess is your strategy is probably weak. Because again, if you don't know where you're going, how do you build a strategy? And then if your strategy is weak, then the tactics associated with that strategy are all misaligned. Yeah. So my point here is, from a leadership perspective, I heard a lot of, where are you going? Why are you going there? What does it mean to you? And in addition to that, or aligned with that, we heard a lot around the phrase words matter.
Yeah, Jesse Itzler said that.
Jesse said it, but even going back to like some of the conversion panels that we watched, like the word choices matter, the confidence and the tonality and the body language, like all of that, the words matter. So having a vision, but then associating the words or saying the right things aligned with that vision, to me was a leadership lesson, something I was thinking around quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess we are blending now a little bit.
Yeah.
Most people here probably don't know because we had a very small private VIP event, and I got to lead a Q&A with Sarah Blakely, which meant I got to watch her interview backstage sitting next to Jesse Itzler, her husband, which was a very cool thing to watch him watch his wife. It was just cool. And then we got to go in all the back corridors together, hang out. I got to hang out with her for 15 or 20 minutes. And so I did 2 weeks of research for that, just for that, 25 minutes. I think I probably listened to 7-8 hours, about Sarah Blakely. One of the things that really struck me about her, to your point about clarity, is she is so focused on being aware of business ideas. And one of the podcasts I listened to framed it so well. The framing question was, this has to exist. Like what is there something that you're like, come hell or high water, this has to exist in the world. Like this has to exist. And she had that mindset with Spanx, like this has to exist, right? And she is so keyed in, Brian, with business ideas and trying to solve the problems. She emails herself these ideas. She has 99 pages of ideas that she goes to and that she visits for her next business ideas. So she's got all these little side projects she does. But conversely, I heard another interview with Jesse, who said, it's funny, Sarah and I are really into creativity and clarity and vision and ideas. The difference is she'll just email them to herself and compartmentalize and silo and stay her eye on the prize. I will have my assistant start executing that day. So I might have like one business idea a day, maybe two, right? In the mix, and then Marquis Jets will stick. Zico water will stick, or Zico coconut water will stick or whatever. Both successful. But if you had to choose one or two, who has the $1 billion business that didn't take any outside funding? Sarah. She stayed focused. She stayed true to her vision. She had a place for her ideas that she siloed and saved that she's going to go back to. I just think that's interesting. From a leadership perspective, I thought a lot about that this week.
Yeah. Could you imagine being Jesse's partner or assistant?
Nope.
The way that mind works. But again, the creativity coming out of him is second to none. So it's an interesting, it was an interesting dynamic to see. I totally agree with you there. Jesse, from a leadership perspective, since we're talking around him and Sarah now, what my greatest, this is going to sound funny. What my greatest takeaway was from Jesse? It was, like you got to interview Sarah in the small group. As you may recall, I interviewed Jesse in the small group.
I know what your biggest takeaway is. I know what you're going to say.
What do you think I'll say? I want to hear it.
When you answer the phone when his kid called.
That blew me away. So for most people that weren't there, we had this small session with Jesse, and there's 100 people in the room. It's Jesse and me. I've got all, like Vija, I did all my research. I'm like, it's time. Like, I can't screw this up. I better do a good job here. And I'm just about to get into it, and his cell phone rings.
And he's on stage, and you and Jesse are on stage, and it was a couple hundred people actually.
We're on, yeah, you're right. There's a few hundred there, and we're on stage ready to go. And again, I'm like, all I'm thinking about is making sure I don't screw this up. And I'm about to ask like the first question, or maybe I just asked the first question and he hadn't answered it yet. And he goes, whoa, hold up. I'm getting a call from my son. And I'm like, okay, that's fascinating. And then we stopped and he picks up the phone, and it wasn't the, hey, whatever his son's name is. Hey, I got to call you back in a few minutes. I'm doing an interview. No, it was, I am going to have a full conversation with my son right now.
They're breaking down a ball game. I could hear. I mean, we all kind of heard.
They were talking about practice, and they were talking, and I was shocked because I love my kids. And if I answer the phone, which I'm probably not, I'm probably saying, hey, I'll call you back in 30.
100%. We all are.
My takeaway though, right? Like, here's a guy that's massively successful business-wise. He's built some amazing things. He's in front of a crowd, but his I don't give an F muscle is so developed
so good
that like he's built these big businesses, but it didn't infringe on his personal world. He knows his priorities.
Right.
And I got work to do there. And I would bet everybody here, I would challenge you. If you're on stage in front of 300 people and your kid calls, how do you react? And by the way, I'm not saying necessarily what he did was right. Some people would say, well, gosh, that's kind of unprofessional. And maybe, but I don't know. I mean, he's at the point in his career where he's like, I know my priorities. And talking to this group I may love, but my son I love more. And that was really, really inspirational to me. Never would think that'd be my biggest takeaway, but from a leadership perspective, what I'm trying to get at is get super clear on what matters to you and why you do
messaging. Look what he messaged to all of us. And what he messaged is, I can tell you anything you want. I will show you my values.
Yeah.
That's what he showed us with that. You know, my other takeaway with that was, if everyone here has not had the pleasure to see Brian on stage, Brian tap danced twice this week. Very, very well. Very, very well. In situations like that where he had to completely, go off script and fill in time and improv. You did great, my friend. You did really well.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to develop that skill. I would prefer to not have to work on it ever again.
Well, that's what your 10,000 hours. That's when you get the payback for that, right?
I was running out of material for sure. I realized 3 minutes and 27 seconds is when I'm out of material, when I'm just trying to fill dead space. So I've got to extend that.
We're on Jesse and Sarah. Can I just add something that
please?
I actually shared when you and I wrapped the whole conference. That really struck me was Sarah talked a lot about how our fear of not being right, not looking good, embarrassment and failure is probably affecting us more than we think. And what she has done is she has just spent the mental time going upstream on that and realizing really this stems from shame. It stems from, being embarrassed and feeling shame, right? So she went upstream and started saying, what can I do, as a human to diffuse that so that I can build my muscle of failing. And that's really what she's trying to do. Just like I need to work out my arm and my leg muscles. I got to start working out now. We build our muscles, right? They tear a little bit, they get a little stronger. She has been doing that for 30 years on failure. And it was just what I liked about it and her different exercises she walked us through, Brian, was that it was a skill, not a talent. The way she walked, it was almost frameworked. Like, oh, this is what I do. I make fun of myself when something bad happens and I proactively put it out in the world. And then sure enough, to your point about Jesse answering the phone, right? To his son, sure enough, as she's explaining this, what I didn't know at the time is she had done a whole bunch of Instagram stories of herself backstage before she walked on stage. And it was there was 2,500. There might've been more in the room that day. The anticipation of Sarah was pretty big. So there might've been even more in the room that day. She had done a whole Instagram thing pointing out how she broke a button on her. She was backstage. You could actually hear my panel in the background, right? She was backstage showing everybody her broken button. Can you believe it? I'm about to go on stage. She diffuses things on purpose. So she just builds that muscle for failure. I Loved that. There is so much we can learn there.
You know, the word I wrote down right now, as you're talking about Sarah and you're talking about Jesse, and a lot of what we've discussed already, I wrote down authenticity.
Mm.
You know, they're true to their word. When Jesse and Heather put in the comments, like it was in line, and what he was sharing was in alignment with his message from the big stage. It's true. He said these things in front of everybody, and then we got him back to a smaller private room, and he honored that.
Yeah.
And Sarah said certain things, and you see her honoring it. And Colin, same sort of thing. And our panelists, and many say, honoring it, right? This refusal to ever be fraudulent in any way is from a leadership perspective. So I want to bring that back to the subject, right? Like, we're going to fail, we're going to make mistakes, and we should be honorable. We should be authentic.
Yeah,
it's really good.
We should talk about Colin O'Brady. So for those of you who don't know who Colin O'Brady is, I would Google him. Here's why. I flew my kids out, two of my three, my 13-year-old daughter, my 20-year-old son. I'll tell you what, Brian, out of anybody on that stage, it was Colin O'Brady for the 13 and 20-year-old. My son posted a story reading 12-hour walk from his college campus on his Instagram, just made me,
that's cool.
And my daughter, I really like that guy. And so I think that, any of you guys who have kids, I just want to encourage you to watch his stuff online. Send your kids his book or whatever. I mean, it really impacted them more than any of those other leaders, more than you and I, my friend. Colin O'Brady was the guy for them,
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I've gotten to know Colin a little bit over the past year because I've worked with him on a couple of different things. And every time I get with him, I'm even more impressed. A couple reasons. Number one, I do believe that mindset he has is something we could all develop, right? Like, I don't think he's given us this pie in the sky thing that you're like, oh, that's just you, Colin. Like, we could develop that muscle for sure. When he talks around, when he tells his whole story, then he talks about going to the elementary school and he asks them all, like, what's your Everest? And these kids will put their hands up and say, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be the president, or whatever it may be. But then he mentioned, as he goes in front of audiences that are older, from teenagers to adults, fewer hands start to go up when he starts asking them about their Everest. And to me, that's shocking. We should really be thinking about that. We've been conditioned to almost limit ourselves. Yeah. And he's teaching us this limitless mindset is what he's talking about. I think that message is so good.
It was super inspiring. It was really great.
One thing about Colin that some behind the scenes stuff that nobody would really know, via, this, but what did Colin send us afterwards? He sent us this video thanking us for allowing him to be on stage and letting us know how much he appreciated the event and all of that. And again, here's a guy who gets paid an awful lot of money, who's got this kind of certain celebrity status, but he gets in the car and he goes to the airport and he's at the gate and he's sending us a message saying, hey, thank you guys. And I love that. It's not an act. And I know it's not an act because that's the third time I've had him at an event where he did that sort of thing. By the way, it's not even the post event, the pre-event, as Abby, who runs all of our marketing, will tell you, that guy does more prep work before an event than most anybody you'll ever see. He's showing up early. He's walking the stage. He's doing AV.
I love that.
That's what I'm trying to say is a professional isn't someone who just shows up on stage and goes for an hour. The professional's doing the pre-work and the post-work during these unseen hours. He was masterful with that.
Let's stay on that a minute because it's an interesting topic, because when I actually spoke on Thursday, on the last morning on the upper limb problem. And one of the things that I shared is a story about my son, Brian, who's a music performance major. He's an oboist. And Michael and I think my numbers were off, by the way, on that talk, anyone who was there, because I talked to my son afterwards. I think leading into college, he was about 4,500 hours into his 10,000 hours of mastery. And I said to him, let's try to calculate out drive time, rehearsal, practice, performance time, whatever. And then I said to him, Michael, out of that 4,500 hours, what percentage of that was spent in performance time, either in a recital, playing in one of your 2 symphonies you did, or an ensemble? You calculated it out and it was maybe 1%, maybe 1%. So 4,000, whatever that number is, I'm not good at math. And I'm not even sure it was 1%, was spent in practice for 1% in performance. Now, then you talk about Colin O'Brady, who does all that prep work. And I charge all of us here. How much of what we do, how much are we practicing scripts? How much are we practicing our performance is our listing presentation and our buyer consult or our recruiting conversation? How much are we practicing that? Are we practicing it on our clients, which is the equivalent of Michael and Colin practicing it on the stage?
Yeah, that is so true. It's so true. And most, maybe some that were on the call, like Colin did do some work for us a few days prior to his performance on the big stage. And that was another opportunity for me to dance, right?
Yeah.
We had some AV issues and he had to improvise. But the funny thing is, Vija, he didn't improvise at all. As a matter of fact, he nailed his script like verbatim.
Of course he did.
Yeah, because he was playing it off like, hey, now he said, I got to go a cappella. Yeah, because you had no sound necessarily to work off of or video to work off of. But he was on script. How? Because he'd practiced that thing a few times. He practiced it. And yes, Heather,
Jesse
right.
Itzler, funny story.
Go ahead.
More engaging. Yeah, probably. Jesse, if you guys get on Jesse Itzler's Instagram, for those of you who are there, and one of his pinned stories is verbatim part of the speech he gave us. The guy is so rehearsed, as flippant as that looked with the DJ and whatever. Every single word and beat of that was choreographed. And if you get on his Instagram, you'll hear exactly word for word when he talks about having 6 toenails floating in his shoes. Remember that funny line? He literally has a clip of him in another speech on his Instagram saying that. Look at the practice that goes into that.
One thing, sorry to interject, I'll tell you a takeaway to relate it back to what it is we all do every day. These individuals, they're not speakers in my mind. They are performance artists. They're performing artists. Like they are. And by the way, I bring that back to what we do. We're the same. Yes. Like the best of the best are not going into a listing presentation with some just scripted presentation. No, there's a performance. There is a cadence. There's a body language. You're acting in your own way, not acting in like an inauthentic way, but you're performing. And I would ask everybody here today, like, when you look at your listing presentation, is it a performance or is it you just kind of going through the motions? I would bet you those that perform, and by the way, when they're performing, they seem supernatural. But the reality is they're the opposite of that. They're incredibly rehearsed. Are you that way? And if the answer is no, not really, to your point, Vija, what are you practicing? How are you practicing? Are you watching film? Are you treating it like, a professional actor, let's say, would do it in a role for a movie? Again, I'm not trying to say not be honest.
That moment. That's right. That's our moment, Brian. Everything we do in real estate is for the appointment. The appointment is where we close our sale, guys. We don't close it when we go pending. We close our sale in real estate when we close ourselves, when we close them to work with us. So in an agreement. So we close our sale getting a listing agreement or a buyer agreement. When they hire you as their buyer agent, you get them into contract. You're in customer service mode now. They've got you. Our sale ends, like the appointment is us on stage. That is everything we do is directed toward that notion. All pressure on your personal business, on your team, all pressure 1,000% goes into your performance at an appointment. I feel like I'm on a soapbox a little bit, but I say that till I'm blue in the face. It's true.
No, I totally agree with you. Since I don't want to run out of time, but I think it's really important to bring it back to this built for this theme. And, one thing that was really interesting, and again, when we had designed it, we'd hoped it'd play out this way. And I think it even played out more so than we anticipated, in that when you say built for this, yes, you have to be skilled. Yes, you have to have, do the activities required to be successful in a changing market. But it was interesting. We had Brooke in talking about hydration.
She was great.
And we had Dr. Trish in talking about breathing. And my takeaway there is being built for this is more than just how we do our job every day. It's how we're physically preparing as well. Like, how are we? Dr. Trish had a great line where I said, I want you to teach us about stress management. How do we better manage our stress through breathing? And she corrected me, if you recall. She goes, it's not stress management. It's not management. It's leverage. I call it how to leverage your stress leverage. So stop saying management. Those are my words, not necessarily hers. But it was really good because she's like, you're going to experience the stress. So don't manage it. Figure out a way to use it to your advantage. And here's some exercises. Here's how you could get your breathing right such that you do that. Same with Brooke. It was like, okay, you're going to go about your day. You're going to have ups and downs throughout your day. Here's how you must be, in this particular case, hydrated or physically maintaining your body and your energy such that you can perform at your highest level. That's, to me, what Built for This is about. It's more than just what you do in the office. It's also what you have going on that's not specific to the job.
Pressure is a privilege. And I loved it. I loved the breathing session. Anything you can do, I'm putting you on the spot right now. Is there anything you could share? It was box breathing. You want to share box breathing before we wrap? That's a good
the box breathing process, this deal. I'll tell you the breathing that when you're breathing in, holding, breathing out, holding, amazing. But I'll tell you my favorite exercise, because I asked her to do it, and I can't really see me, but when she taught us to like kind of massage underneath like our diaphragm and spend time massaging that area and then take some deep breaths, you do feel so much different. I also like when she had us put our hands on our ribs and like feel the expansion as we're breathing in and breathing out, and just like really trying to expand your rib cage. And it was interesting, right? Because you're in the room and I'm sitting up there with her. The whole energy in the room changes.
Oh, I was backstage.
You almost like you feel like you want to take a nap after, in a room of 2,000 people, to suddenly feel like everyone's calm. I mean, it just kind of shows you the power of breath. And some of us watching today, we may not believe in this stuff. I'm telling you, the science. I mean, then you don't believe in the science, right? And so we've got to, if you want to be a master of your craft, it's more than just the scripts and dialogues that we role play.
Oh, for sure.
It's being a full-fledged corporate athlete, in my opinion.
For sure. Well, thank you, Brian. That was great. It was really fun. I haven't really talked it through yet, so it was such a real week. So it was super fun to talk it through with you. And thank you for everyone for chiming in. Here's what's going to happen, Vija. You and I are going to get off this call, and then we're going to say 10 things. We forgot about a dozen other things. I know. I haven't gotten through my list yet, but I know there's so much. And I know there'll be more footage coming out in the future we could review and things like that. We might have to do another one of these sometime soon. Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. We need to. And there will be coming out. I don't know how, because I feel like everyone's going to ask me, but if you email powerplaybooks@place.com, we'll put you on some kind of a list. I don't know how they're going to roll it out. It might be on our BuiltHOW podcast, not sure, but we'll get you on the mailing list regardless. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of you guys for joining in. And for those of you who were there last week, thank you for all of your awesome messages. I'm sure Brian got a ton too. It was really, really cool for me to do a keynote. I moderate a lot. That was a cool moment for me. I appreciate all the love I got. So thank you guys. Have a great week, and we will see you next week back with Sarita. Thank you guys. Bye, everyone.